The news broke like a thunderclap across the sports world. Caitlin Clark's arrival in the EuroLeague wasn't a rumor anymore. It was official. The league confirmed what insiders had whispered for weeks, and suddenly, the basketball landscape shifted. Fans who watched Clark electrify arenas in America now face a reality that her star power would shine on European courts too. The WNBA, which had banked its entire marketing strategy on her shoulders, was thrown into chaos. This wasn't just a player move. It was a declaration of independence, a power play that rattled an entire establishment to its core. From the moment the EuroLeague confirmation dropped, whispers turned into screams. Commentators across social media argued that Clark had finally broken free from the glass ceiling of WNBA salaries. In Europe, she wouldn't just play basketball. She'd collect paychecks dwarfing her rookie deal. Fans remembered Ice Cube's $5 million Big Three offer for fewer than 10 games and realized something sobering. Europe had the money to match. Clark wasn't just leaving for adventure. She was leaving because the numbers spoke louder than any league promises ever could. Money became the undeniable headline. It's not just the dollar signs, though. Clark's WNBA rookie contract felt insulting in comparison to the talent she brought. For years, barely over $338,000 total, while her male NBA counterpart Victor Wembanyama secured $55 million in the same span. The disparity was grotesque, a public stain on how women's basketball stars are treated. Clark's decision to pursue opportunities overseas wasn't betrayal. It was survival. Her fans understood it, even if the league wouldn't admit it. The financial mismatch became the spark to a raging firestorm of debate that consumed every basketball conversation. Inside WNBA headquarters, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and executives scrambled to contain the fallout. Their star attraction, the reason arenas were packed to standing room capacity, was slipping away at least part-time. Before Clark, their games drew modest crowds. With her, even third balconies filled, desperate to catch a glimpse of her deep threes. The WNBA's meteoric rise was built on her rookie shoulders, and now, those shoulders were carrying her across the Atlantic. Engelbert knew this wasn't just bad optics. It was catastrophic. A league finally in the spotlight risked being plunged back into irrelevance without its shining centerpiece. The narrative grew darker as critics accused the WNBA of losing its golden goose through arrogance and mismanagement. They leaned into race-baiting controversies, undercutting Clark's accomplishments. And in doing so, they alienated the very star breathing life into the league. This wasn't just incompetence, it was sabotage. Fans who once celebrated the league now whisper betrayal, saying leadership had destroyed their own star. Clark's overseas move looked less like exploration and more like escape. She wasn't abandoning the WNBA. She was fleeing the very structure that should have nurtured her greatness, but instead chose to suffocate it. The EuroLeague, long overlooked in the American sports narrative, suddenly stood center stage. Founded in 1958, this was no novelty act or off-season distraction. It was a crown jewel of European women's basketball. Here, Clark would not only compete, but thrive against international talent renowned for precision, strategy, and physicality. Unlike the short summer stint of the WNBA, EuroLeague meant October to April battles across Europe's most iconic arenas. The league's credibility was undeniable, its intensity unmatched. To Clark, this wasn't a downgrade, it was a battlefield upgrade. Fans began realizing she wasn't just stepping sideways. She was stepping into something bigger. Clark's choice wasn't simply about the games. It was about brand power. In the WNBA, her highlights went viral. Deep threes, fiery rivalries, explosive crowds. But Europe offered something the WNBA never could: global recognition. Playing internationally transformed her from a domestic phenomenon into a worldwide icon. Paris championships, Turkish clashes, Russian showdowns. These moments would stamp her name across every basketball-loving nation. The move screamed ambition. Clark wasn't satisfied being queen of one castle. She wanted to rule the entire kingdom. Her brand would now live on both sides of the Atlantic, doubling her reach and cementing her legend. But the collateral damage was undeniable. Without Clark anchoring every storyline, the WNBA risked shrinking overnight. Ratings that had soared thanks to her Indiana Fever games would inevitably collapse. Before her, televised matches averaged under 400,000 viewers. With her, over 1 million tuned in, sometimes triple that number. Now imagine those numbers evaporating because her time was split. The fever games wouldn't command the same electricity. The viral moments wouldn't flood TikTok and Twitter. The rivalries, especially with Angel Reese, would lose their sting. The league's momentum wasn't just threatened, it was already slipping through their fingers. Meanwhile, across Europe, teams salivated at the chance to market Caitlin Clark as their superstar. In Spain, fans line up overnight just for preseason tickets. In Turkey, whispers spread that arenas would break attendance records the moment Clark stepped onto the floor. She wouldn't just be a player, she'd be a sensation, a phenomenon whose presence alone could finance an entire club. That kind of demand created a frightening scenario for the WNBA. If European franchises treated Clark like royalty, how could America ever lure her back full-time? The balance of power was beginning to shift overseas. What made Europe even more alluring was its relentless schedule. October through April, 6 straight months of non-stop competition, compared to the WNBA's short May to September stint. For a competitor like Clark, who craved the ball in her hands, this wasn't just appealing, it was irresistible. Twice the grind, twice the stage, twice the opportunity to refine her game. The WNBA felt like checkers. The EuroLeague felt like chess. Clark wasn't seeking comfort. She was seeking conquest. The structure of the European calendar allowed her to live out her basketball addiction without pause, and that terrified WNBA executives watching helplessly. Every step she took in Europe expanded her myth. Traveling to Paris, Istanbul, Moscow, or Madrid wasn't just glamorous, it was transformative. She was no longer an American star. She was a global ambassador. Brands lined up, salivating at the chance to slap their logos across her jerseys. In airports, fans screamed her name in languages she didn't yet speak. She was gaining more than money and games. She was gaining cultural capital, rewriting the idea of what it meant to be a women's basketball player. Clark's journey was no longer just about basketball. It was about revolution. And while Clark rose higher, the WNBA plummeted. Their carefully orchestrated strategy had revolved around one name, Caitlin Clark. Every promo, every social media post, every broadcast leaned on her highlights. Now, with her heading abroad, their blueprint was in tatters. This wasn't just losing a star. It was losing the heartbeat of their entire marketing plan. Sponsors who once eagerly cut checks for Clark-fueled exposure now questioned the return on investment. Networks had declining ratings with unease. The WNBA's Clark plan had collapsed and no backup existed. The league's survival instinct now meant desperation rather than vision. Consider the numbers again. Indiana Fever games averaged 1.18 million viewers, dwarfing the 394,000 average for every other matchup. 19 of the league's 22 most-watched games involved Clark. Those weren't coincidences. They were proof that she carried the WNBA on her shoulders. Without her, those numbers fall off a cliff. Fans didn't tune in for mediocre teams. They tuned in for Clark's deep threes, her rivalries, her fearless swagger. Strip her away, and you strip away the audience. The WNBA wasn't prepared for this exodus. Now, they were left staring at spreadsheets bleeding red ink and arenas returning to emptiness. But make no mistake, Clark's departure wasn't about abandoning fans. It was about honoring herself. She had been exploited, underpaid, and overshadowed by a system that didn't value her properly. Europe was an escape. It was a statement, a declaration that she would no longer settle for crumbs when she deserved banquets. Fans, even in America, secretly understood. They wanted her happy, even if that meant fewer nights in fever jerseys. Deep down, they knew this wasn't betrayal. It was evolution. Clark wasn't running from responsibility. She was running toward greatness, and they would follow her anywhere she went. Her move also exposed a broader truth. If Caitlin Clark could leave, why couldn't others? What about stars like Breanna Stewart, Aya Wilson, or Sabrina Ionescu? If Europe offered respect, money, and global exposure, why stay chained to a system that barely kept the lights on? Clark's decision wasn't just personal. It was precedent, a signal flare that warned the WNBA. Fix your house, or watch more stars walk out the door. What began as one player's journey could become a tidal wave. The league's executives weren't just worried. They were terrified of the dominoes Clark might knock over. Her dual career path was genius in its design. WNBA in the summer, EuroLeague in the winter, Together, a full year of dominance. For Clark, it meant doubling her earnings, doubling her exposure, doubling her opportunities. For everyone else, it meant exhaustion. No one else could keep up with that pace, that pressure, that spotlight. Clark wasn't just raising the bar. She was building an entirely new ladder. Her peers would have to decide, rise to her level or be left in the shadows. Either way, the basketball world would never look the same again after her decision. Even the cultural divide between WNBA and EuroLeague was striking. In America, the league thrived on glitz, highlight reels, and social media buzz. Deep threes became Instagram fodder. Rivalries fueled Twitter storms. But Europe valued something else. Fundamentals, precision, team play. To thrive overseas, Clark would need to adjust, proving she wasn't just flash, but substance. For a player of her caliber, that was no obstacle. It was an opportunity. Every adjustment, every challenge she faced would sharpen her game, making her not just the most famous women's basketball player alive, but arguably the most complete. Her critics, of course, tried to spin it differently. They claimed Clark was chasing money, abandoning loyalty, and diluting her WNBA legacy. But those critiques rang hollow. Fans saw through it. They knew she wasn't just playing basketball anymore. She was rewriting history. By stepping onto European courts, she wasn't losing loyalty. She was gaining immortality. Every arena she entered became part of her story. Every crowd chanting her name was another stone laid in her legend. The criticism faded into white noise as the bigger picture came into focus. Caitlin Clark was building an empire. The move was also deeply symbolic. For decades, women's basketball had been overshadowed, underfunded, and underestimated. Clark's EuroLeague confirmation became a rallying cry. It said, "We don't need crumbs from billion-dollar leagues. We can build power abroad." The WNBA wasn't the only stage. It wasn't the final destination. Suddenly, little girls in Europe weren't just watching from afar. They were seeing Clark live, believing that greatness could happen in their hometowns too. The ripple effect was immeasurable. She wasn't just playing games. She was inspiring revolutions, one country at a time, with every dribble, every shot, every smile. What terrified the WNBA most was that Clark didn't need them anymore. They needed her. Without Clark, arenas would empty. Without Clark, ratings would plummet. Without Clark, sponsors would vanish. And she knew it. That leverage shifted the power dynamic forever. The league could no longer dictate terms. Clark had proven that her star was bigger than their system. She could walk away, and the world would still follow her. For the first time, the WNBA faced a truth they couldn't escape. Their survival hinged not on the league itself, but on one woman. Her journey to Europe also highlighted the differences in how players were treated. In EuroLeague, teams travel like superstars, staying in five-star hotels, playing in world-class arenas, and being showered with adoration. Clark would experience that firsthand. And once she did, how could she ever go back? The WNBA's cramped flights and modest paychecks looked pitiful in comparison. The stark contrast embarrassed American basketball, showing how little the U.S. invested in its female stars. For Clark, this wasn't just about money, it was about respect. And Europe, unlike America, seemed eager to give her exactly that. Even as she prepared to dominate abroad, Clark never lost sight of her fans back home. She knew they were conflicted, proud of her, yet sad to see her go. But she also knew they wanted her happy, fulfilled, and respected. She wasn't abandoning them. She was carrying them with her every step of the way, from Indiana to Istanbul, from Des Moines to Madrid. Every shot she sank overseas would still echo back to American fans who believed in her from the start. Her EuroLeague journey wasn't separation. It was expansion. Her story was now everyone's story. And then came the realization that Caitlin Clark wasn't just elevating herself. She was elevating the entire sport. Suddenly, EuroLeague women's basketball wasn't hidden. It was trending. Headlines screamed her name. Broadcasts picked up European games. American fans tuned in late at night to watch streams from Turkey, Russia, Spain. One player had turned the Continental League into a global attraction. Clark wasn't just chasing greatness. She was dragging an entire sport into the light, forcing recognition where there had been neglect. The EuroLeague's confirmation wasn't just her arrival. It was women's basketball's awakening. Her every move became symbolic warfare. Each game overseas was a reminder to the WNBA of what they had risked losing. Each sellout arena was proof that Clark's appeal wasn't confined to one country. Each highlight reel that went viral from Europe was a dagger to the heart of WNBA executives. She had become their nightmare scenario, too big to control, too ambitious to confine. Clark's global expansion wasn't just entertainment, it was leverage, and with every step, she tightened the noose around a league already suffocating under its own mistakes. Europe was an escape. It was a weapon. The international competition promised to harden her in ways the WNBA couldn't. Facing Russian teams that relied on brute strength one night, then Turkish squads weaving intricate strategies the next, Clark would be challenged relentlessly. Every game became a new puzzle, every opponent a new lesson. This wasn't highlight basketball. This was survival basketball. And each victory sharpened her into something deadlier. Fans began whispering that when she returned to the WNBA, she wouldn't just dominate, she'd annihilate. Europe wasn't softening her legacy. It was forging her into an unstoppable force the league couldn't contain, no matter how hard it tried. Even television executives couldn't ignore the ripple effects. With Clark, games skyrocketed in viewership. Without her, numbers crumbled. Networks realized they weren't negotiating with the WNBA. They were negotiating with Caitlin Clark herself. She had become bigger than the product she represented. No other player, no other storyline could compare. She was a needle mover, the ratings machine, the cultural touchstone. And now, she was splitting her power between continents. Television couldn't decide if that was terrifying or exhilarating. Either way, they knew one truth. Wherever Clark went, audiences would follow. She was no longer a player. She was a spectacle. For the WNBA, the wake-up call was brutal. Their survival depended on one star, and that star had just proven she didn't need them to thrive. Executives scrambled for damage control, but the optics were unforgiving. Sponsors hesitated. Fans grumbled. Critics pounced. The narrative had shifted from WNBA rising to WNBA desperate, and all of it because one woman refused to settle. Clark's move to Europe didn't just highlight the league's flaws. It exposed them, broadcast them, magnified them. Every headline about her EuroLeague journey was another reminder that the WNBA wasn't driving its own destiny anymore. She was. And so, the story of Caitlin Clark's EuroLeague confirmation became something far bigger than basketball. It wasn't just about contracts, rivalries, or even wins and losses. It was about power, who had it, who lost it, and who demanded it. Clark's journey was a story of an athlete who refused to bow, who demanded respect, who showed the world that greatness couldn't be confined by one league's limitations. The WNBA may have gone bananas, but the rest of the world understood the truth. Caitlin Clark wasn't leaving home. She was building a new empire, one arena, one country, one legacy at a time.